now. Thanks, Lisa and Jason. Take it away.
Okay. So you guys, oh my gosh, buckle up. We're about to talk about projectile points. It's going to get super exciting here. Okay. So first of all, to talk a little bit, I know we have varying degrees of expertise coming into this meeting. Some people are making their own projectile points. Some people have collections of projectile points or have collected them or seen them or visited them before. But just to make sure that we're all starting on the same page, we call these projectile points. The terminology is kind of evolving. You look at these, most people think of an arrowhead. Everyone knows what you're talking about. A projectile point makes things a little more general, but it still suggests that these things are attached to a flying object, right? Either an arrow or a spear. Lately, archaeologists have started referring to these in reports that I've read as PPKs, projectile point or knife. And really what these are, the way that I think about them is kind of the pre-metal Swiss Army knife. You initially make a good piece of stone into a tool. It could be a knife, it could be a scraper, it could be an arrow point, it could be a spear point. It's essentially an edged tool. One example of these being repurposed is even if you have a spear or arrow point, you get that into an animal, the animal dies, you go over, you can break off the shaft of your spear or arrow and pull it out, and you have a fully hafted knife that you can then use to process that animal. So right there, there's a lot of versatility. Once you're done processing the animal, depending on what kind of condition it's in, if it's broken, you can still rework that with the tools that you have to hand for making stone tools. And you can use that to scrape hides, to pull off tendons, to do anything that you need to do. It's not just about killing animals, it can also be about processing vegetable foods. But these things are really, this might be the first form that it took, or it might be something else that was repurposed, a knife that was napped down into an arrow point or a spear point. So keep in mind that these are versatile objects and that the values that we assign to them now may not necessarily be how they were thought of in the past. We don't really get into the heads of people very well that were making and using stone tools. This is just one avenue. We're going to be also referring to these by time periods. If you're confused, want to know more, if you have a question at any point about exactly how old something is, please talk over me, just ask a question. You can do that at any point. I won't be offended. That's sort of the point. This is informal. But generally speaking, in the Americas, we have the Paleo-Indian period, the Archaic period, and the Woodland period, and then contact. The Paleo-Indian period is 13,000 years ago, to about 8,000 or 9,000 years ago. The Archaic period is sort of the sandwich in between that and what we would probably start to recognize as tribes of Indians that come about 3,000 years ago. And then the Woodland period is about 2,000 or 3,000 years ago until the contact period with Europeans, when Indians are really interacting with non-Indians full time. The way that I kind of keep it straight, if I'm saying paleo, if you think about paleontology, that stuff is really old. Archaic, pretty old. Woodland, not as old. We're coming into sort of modern human times. Something else to understand is the way that we've put dates on these objects, the way we've assigned a time period to particular styles of things. And that is exclusively through context when we're excavating. Let's take, for example, the Folsom Point, which is one of the first identified American types. It was identified in the early 20th century. And the people who were finding them initially, they didn't have any idea how old these things were. The first named Folsom Point was found embedded in a mammoth skeleton. So it's pretty clear at that point, we learn a whole bunch of things from that discovery, right? That people and mammoths coexisted. That people ate mammoths, and because they also cooked or had fires around this mammoth, there was charcoal. So later excavations went back, they were able to do carbon dating, and now we have a sort of a beginner date range for that point type. And so to the extent that we have a time period to assign to these, it's usually through carbon dating or other sort of, what's the word I'm looking to, relative dating methods. And then the thing that I think is really the coolest thing and the most difficult to understand about these is that for huge periods of time, all across the country, various different groups of people were making points or knives or blades in similar styles. And it may just be that that was the most convenient shape for that object to be, but for the, you know, such a widely dispersed population to make that decision all at one time is interesting. And so I think that there is some validity to thinking about these as a cultural object, where part of your personal identity is, this is how we make this particular thing. Jason is throwing up a beautiful image of a Clovis point, sort of the archetypical nations-wide identifiable point type. These are some of the oldest points that we find in the Americas. They're found, you know, from the Arctic Circle to Latin America to South America. They're everywhere. And they have a very distinctive, it's called the fluted point. I was about to point to it, but you guys can't see what I'm pointing to. The flute, thank you, Jason, is this channel that's down the middle that aids in hafting it onto a wood or bone attachment. And something that people, I think, envision when you see these spear points, which what they appear to be, that they were probably also used as knives. Again, it's a multi-tool. Is that, you know, there's every museum I've been to, especially older museums, they have pictures of like a band of dudes with Clovis points hafted onto spears, and they're like physically running after a mammoth right up to it and like stabbing it with these things, right? And it kind of turns out that's not really what they were doing. So if they had it on a spear, they were likely using an atlatl to lob it really hard at something that was farther away, because I just can't see how attacking a mammoth up close and personal is going to be safe or practical, or even something that you'd want to do when there are smaller animals that you could eat. But also when they've done analysis of the kinds of blood remains that they find on the edges of these when they come from a, you know, a well excavated site, they're used for everything. Jason was telling me that they actually, not a Clovis point, but I think he said the Middle Archaic point. Jason, do you want to correct me, from the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center? I'm going to assume that I'm right. They tested they were able to test blood from the edge of a projectile point, and it was eel blood. So they're using spears to go eeling, which is using, you know, more of our available human tricks, right? People in the Potomac River, any of the rivers around here, they would, my dog is making insane noises. That's why I'm moving farther away from him.
I'm gonna grab it.
Okay, Jason's gonna grab it. There we go. Okay, so people would build fish weirs, basically a dam where fish could swim up to a certain point and then they'd get stuck. And then when you have all of the fish or eels like sort of conglomerating in one particular confined space, then you can just go in and stab them as many times as you want, and it's super easy, and it's way easier than, like, you know, traditional spear fishing or trying to stab a mammoth up close and personal. So we also find them, one of the hypotheses that's come up lately is that maybe they're tracking down a wounded, sick, or injured, or elderly mammoth and then just sort of finishing it off. But their hunting skills were more diverse, more interesting, and more complicated than just spearing something to death. One sort of ridiculous overcorrection that I saw was, I think, on the Discovery Channel, where they included like a pregnant woman was also chasing a mammoth with a spear. And that's like, not, again, like, I'm all for like, yeah, the ladies were probably using stone tools too. That's the tools that were available, but they probably were not, again, chasing down a mammoth and stabbing it right in the heart while it was trying to kill them. Anyway, so Jason is going to pull up several examples of point types. If there's anything that you want to see again, you can just holler and we'll put it back up. But we're looking at, what is next, Jason?
Let's see, LaCroix.
Lovely. So one of the things that also changes from the very earliest occupation of the Americas, the Clovis period, to more recent times is the materials that people were using. So one of our attendees tonight is a Flint napper, and he mentioned the difficulty of finding good material to use here in Maryland, which is it's an issue. And it was an issue in the past too. So Clovis people, we know they had huge, crazy trade networks. So not only was everybody from the Arctic Circle to the tip of South America making tools in the same shape and style, which is interesting, they were seeking out specifically high quality materials. We have some Mineral Club people here as well. They probably know way more about this kind of stuff than I do, but I know that for stone tools, what you're looking for is called a cryptocrystalline material. So that's something that has some of the qualities of glass. It's going to hold a sharp edge. That's what you want. And so materials like chert and flint, chalcedony, agates, jasper, those are all things that when you flake them, they hold a sharp edge. And to get those materials, they really had to have a geological understanding of where to find them. Which is something I think we don't necessarily think of, sort of prehistoric peoples as having those kinds of skills. In addition to knowing where to find them, they had extensive trade networks. So now that we're able to trace particular kinds of stones to particular pre-contact quarries, we can see that, stuff from Texas is showing up in Washington State, stuff from Utah is showing up in Pennsylvania, stuff from Pennsylvania and New York is showing up in Maryland. And that's all probably, to some extent, people moving seasonally around, but also, trading with people. When you get to the more recent Native American sites, there seems to be less of an emphasis placed on those trade networks, or those trade networks don't exist anymore. People are making do with the local materials. In Maryland, we have kind of garbage material for making stone tools. It's not impossible, but it's not the best. We have quartz, quartzite, rhyolite. To some extent, there's some jasper quarries that are nearby. There's a couple in Virginia. There's flint from Pennsylvania that you can get. And there's stuff that washes around in river cobbles. So if you get lucky, you might hit on something awesome. One of the solutions that people had to making an okay material into a much better material was heat treating. So if you heat cryptocrystalline stones to 350 degrees Celsius, it becomes a little more brittle, easier to work, and it holds an edge a little bit better.
Lisa?
Yeah.
Hey, do you have on these pictures scale? People are asking about the size, what they're looking at.
So we can certainly provide scales. I think, Jason, we don't have an ability to put a scale on this.
No, we don't have scales on these. Yeah, these are, so all of these are, except for this one and the Clovis points that I showed earlier, are points that the Natural History Society has in their collection in Maryland. I kind of focused on the Maryland in this regard, but we also have points from all over, Ohio, Arkansas, and things like that. And they're all 3D scanned. And unfortunately, my personal 3D scanner does not have the ability to include a scale, but we could certainly, like the Clovis points are usually, can be various sizes, and we can certainly discuss the various sizes like verbally. I would say like this Kirk serrated point is typically about like 2 inches long by maybe like 1 inch wide. There's a lot of variety. I mean, the one thing that we want to talk about is like, you're going to see a lot of images. You've seen some images right now, like the Clovis points all look pretty uniform, as Lisa had said. Like they are, it seems like it was a time which seemed very interesting because it's so early in the North American human occupation of North America, that there was pretty much a uniform point type across the country, and not just across the country, but across the northern and southern hemisphere of the Americas. And then as they, after like about 9,000 or 9,500 BC, like variations started occurring, and the points actually started reducing in size significantly. So you're talking about like a 6-inch projectile point, like that first Clovis point I showed you. I can show again. I mean, it's a huge point. It's extremely large. And the variation in size just changes, and we don't really know because it varies over time. So you have this point, which is fairly large, probably about like 1.5 to 2 inches to like 6 inches, even larger sometimes in size. And then the next phase, after 9,500, you start getting into like smaller points, which would be this Kirk serrated point. And one thing about the early Archaic relative to the Paleolithic period is that you had that fluted point in the Paleo point, the Clovis point. You don't have the fluted points anymore, but you still do have this bifurcate edge. So clearly traditions continued, but the point sizes and styles changed dramatically. And those are just things that we don't know. We can hypothesize until our faces turn blue, but we don't really have a firm understanding. Lisa's making a face to tell me that I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. I just wanted to add that in addition to just the workaday Clovis points being, some variations in size, there are also deposits, caches, like groups of points that have been found apparently deliberately placed underground for reasons that we don't completely understand. And there was one, it was in Washington State, a Clovis point cache, where these things were all huge. I mean, they were, 6 to 8 inches long and 3-4 inches wide, like big, giant Clovis points. They were made, there was no evidence that they were ever used, and then they were just buried deliberately. So I don't know what that's about. We do have a couple questions that I wanted to address that are in the chat here. So Ilka had asked, isn't there a large rhyolite deposit found on South Mountain? And yes, there is. There's several rhyolite quarries in Maryland, and that's one of those okay materials for making tools. Like if you just need something to get by and you don't need the Rolls Royce of points, then yeah, rhyolite will get the job done.
Yeah. However, expanding on Ilka's point, so rhyolite. So as Lisa had indicated, there's a variety of materials that Native peoples utilized in Maryland, but also while point types change, also the material, the stone material that they preferred also changed. Sometimes it was opportunistic. So like throughout all phases of like pre-contact occupation, you're going to find quartz points in various styles. You're going to find quartzite points in various styles. But what we found doing archaeology over the last 40 to 50 years in Maryland is that it's become abundantly clear that certain types of stone were preferred during different periods. So to Lisa's point about the site with the eel blood. So that was a site in Beltsville that was located along the Paint Branch. And it wasn't a village, it was kind of like a long-term resource procurement site. So people were coming there because there was good hunting there. It wasn't for tool making, but we did find a lot. There wasn't like materials for tool making, but we did find that they were making a lot of tools there. They were bringing basically what we call blanks, which are like like chipped tools, like larger pieces of stone that they were then finishing off at this camp, probably in the evenings or whenever, when they're not doing other work. That site, it was from the late Archaic period. So I have to apologize, I couldn't find my unmute button, Lisa. It was from it was a late Archaic site. So dating to about 500 BC to 1250 BC, and their preference was rhyolite. And as Lisa had said, it's not the best stone. So it's kind of interesting that during the late Archaic period, not just at that site, but sites across Maryland, that people were using rhyolite. That was their preferred stone. And there are only a few rhyolite quarries that are regional. There's the one in South Mountain and like in the Catoctin Mountain region. Lisa and I won't be giving anything away, but we did a lot of work for the Park Service, and we identified there was one quarry that's outside of a national park, but there's also one that's inside of the national park. And when Lisa and I were working there, we were re-identifying a site. It was a site that was identified in the 70s, and part of our job was to relocate some of these sites. And we're like, how are we going to find these? The mapping was terrible, and we're walking up this road, and all of a sudden we just see tons of rhyolite on the road. And we're like, well, this is interesting. And it's like, this is all flake stone. And then we get up to this one like terrace, and it's just a giant rhyolite quarry with just like cut out banks filled with flake stone and cobbles, and well, not cobbles, but like just, it was all tool making material. And we did additional work there, and it was it was like you can go 3 feet deep, and you know, you're hitting.
It sounds like glass in the stream. It's just
Yeah.
all tool making debris.
Yeah.
We have a couple other questions. Another one is, do you suspect that the size change indicates a shift from spears and knives to arrows? And that's a great question. So arrow technology doesn't happen until about 1008 BC. So that's definitely part of it. But it also seems to be, you know, we still have spear-sized and knife-sized tools that are being made among a vast variety of other things. It's just people stopped making Clovis points. And I think, you know, one of the things, I'm not a flint knapper, but I've met a lot of flint knappers. And one of the things they say is putting those flutes in the base of a Clovis point. That's kind of a real test of your flint knapping ability, because that's when you could snap that thing in half. Exactly. And after all the work that you've done to reduce this piece of stone into the perfectly napped point that you've made, risking that hours of work and the many, many bloody knuckles that you've suffered after making this thing, and sacrificing a very nice piece of stone, it's really difficult. They're really kind of over-engineered. Like, all you need to kill something is something pointy. It can be a pointy bone, a pointy rock, a pointy stick. There's a certain amount of engineering that goes into making it fly straight if you're throwing it out of an atlatl or shooting it out of a bow and arrow or throwing it just with your arm. But I think it's a changing traditions, the nature of the resources that people are exploiting, and also a cultural shift. So people are placing less of a priority on this extreme skill of being able to make lots of these points reliably, and to access the materials that are really best for making those tools. Somebody says Excalibur. Yes, exactly. I've always wanted to find a Clovis point. I've known people who are like just natural Clovis point finders. It's super annoying. Like I've never found one myself, but I used to work with a guy who could like literally sat down to have lunch, and he sat on a Clovis point. And that is how annoying that guy was. Might the buried and unused points be offerings? 100%. Yeah, I mean, that's what most archaeologists think. But again, we're talking about a population of people that's been gone for thousands and thousands of years. I remember thinking some of the thoughts that I've had, saving them for later, but then why make really beautiful giant ones that aren't really practical for use and then never use them? And, you know, this is the point of making it into a tiny little tool, is it's portable and you might need that. So I think offerings of some sort make sense, or again, when we don't know for sure, ritual purposes is a good catch-all. Somebody points out rhyolite seems so rough. I never thought to use it. Try it. It's been popular for thousands of years. When were stone tools made by friction and not napping? So this is a great question, always. In order to even nap a tool, you have to first have a certain cache of tools that you can draw from. So you need a hammerstone, probably some bone or antler tools for doing the flat, fine pressure flaking around the edges to get the really fine edge. You need a variety of different things just to start making certain kinds of tools. But things like axe heads, celts, bowls, things like that. If you've been to the Natural History Society, you may have seen the 55 tons of steatite bowls that we have for some reason. If you haven't, you're welcome to come and visit them when COVID-19 resolves. These people have, they call them ground stone tools. So just made by polishing or techniques other than knapping forever. People have been doing a lot of that. Yeah, that's been around for a long time. Yeah, pecking and grinding was a thing, says somebody. Thank you for answering that much more concisely than I did. See if I have any other questions that I've missed. Okay, so something else that I wanted to bring up. Did anybody see the thing about the rock crystal blades that were found in a cave in Spain? That was kind of all over the internet about a few weeks or a month ago. There was a really striking photograph of this clear crystal. It looks like it's snapped out of a piece of glass. It's amazing. It's really, really beautiful. There were a bunch of those that were found. Just read the article a few weeks ago. Yeah, somebody says, just in case, White Walkers. Yes, the meme for it was like, hold on to that because whatever that's the only thing that will kill the bad thing is about to come because 2020. So those were found in a really interesting context where it was found with several deceased individuals. So it was like a man surrounded by 13 women and a ton of these rock crystal tools that were not used. They were made and then not used. And so I think at least in Spain, there's definitely evidence for some sort of ceremonial use of these, that certain stone materials carried a certain connotation. And I think that's true here as well because of the preference for really beautiful stone. In fact, we have one, I don't know if Jason's back from resolving our barking dog downstairs.
I am. I brought him in with me, so he might be barking. He's hearing you, which is really funny. He's looking around for you. But yeah, go ahead. What was your question?
Oh, just that even in Maryland, where we, again, have sort of garbagey material, there's this one that has the sort of white stripe across the top. People were on the lookout for aesthetics in making these. I think this one is a really nice example of that. This is looks like a quartzite that happens to have a very neat little stripe of something closer to quartz in the middle of it. When I was working in Utah, we had a beautiful chert called Brushy Basin Chert. It was formed during a time when there were volcanoes. So it's like a creamy white to greenish cream colored base, but then it has these black and red, like almost spots from where volcanic ash was landing in the silt beds that eventually formed this chert. And it's like the colors are amazing. The patterns are striking. It's really beautiful. It's apparently very sought after in the Southwest during a certain period of time. And so even people that were, this was at a site that was sort of Chaco culture era, even at a time when stone tools were not the primary focus of a culture, they were more pottery people. It was still sought out because it's pretty, I assume. I don't know. I don't want to ascribe motives to people of the past that I don't know, but it is pretty, and they used a lot of it when they had other options. So somebody has pointed out that pecking and grinding, while it was a thing, it takes forever. It really did, but you know, there are some, I wonder again if that might be, you know, it seems like it would be easier to knap something that you could use as an axe, but people did peck and grind axes. And that's something I haven't really thought about. I wonder why that was. I'm going to be that guy, says somebody. What do you two think about that 30,000-year-old site in Mexico and the increasing amount of pre-Clovis sites? Good point. Okay, so I don't have a dog in the pre-Clovis fight. For those of you who extra don't have a dog in this fight, there has long been this sort of Clovis is the oldest. So 12,000 to 13,000-ish years ago, there's nothing before that, is what some people for some reason say. Part of this comes from, you know, sort of scholarly rivalries that have emerged. Personalities in archaeology can be kind of a big thing. So there's the main hypothesis is that during a time of climate change, people came down basically through the Bering Strait while there was a, there was a connection between basically Russia and the Americas. And that happened about 13,000 years ago. And those are the first people to come to the Americas, and that's it. I think the debate comes about that, okay, so 13,000-ish years ago, people arrive here. And at the same time, all across the Americas. So these guys came across the Bering Strait, and then they took a high-speed train to the tip of South America, because you have sites that date to 13,000-ish years ago down there that have Clovis points on them. And the quick dispersal of this particularly distinctive technology across continents in a very, very short period of time seems a little difficult to accept to me. There are other options that people had. They could have been sort of boat hopping down the coast, and the coastal sites have since been inundated since sea level rise has happened in the last several thousand years. There is talk about an ice-free corridor between Canada and the Americas, the rest of North America, so that there may have been places where glacial ice parted and people could go in between that and come down at earlier times all across North America. So yeah, there's another question. I will get to that in a second. So I'm completely open to a well-documented site being older than Clovis. That makes complete sense to me. I don't see any reason. People are really, ingenious. They come up with all kinds of things. People were never simple and straightforward. They were probably getting down here through a variety of means. I know that, what is the name of the site that I'm thinking of? It's completely escaped my mind. There's one in Chile that's pretty well documented that people fight like crazy about. It's right on the tip of my brain. Did somebody just type it? Right, somebody says inconceivable that the same tech was invented at similar times. You may be incredulous that I doubt that, or I don't think it's unbelievable that the same technology could be invented at, okay. So yeah, I think it's not just a matter of the same technology. People have been making stone tools all over the world since forever, but it's this really distinctive type being everywhere at the same time. Seems like maybe there was an existing population a little bit earlier. And there have definitely been a few well-documented sites that are sort of working their way into the archaeological consciousness, but there's a high bar for proof before it will be widely accepted. So I think there are definitely, I'm a little on the fence, but I see no reason why people couldn't have been here sooner. Bering Sea land bridge roughly 20,000 years ago. Right, yeah, so they could have been coming across at any time. And not at any time, but they could have been earlier. Somebody says Paleo-Indian points in the form of crescents on the Channel Islands. This was for waterfowl hunting, but I still don't understand how this form was used. I'm going to be honest with you, neither do I. Somebody standing up in favor of pecked and ground stone tools points out it doesn't snap, so you can pass it down to the next generation. That's true. So maybe the grinding and pecking people were into heirlooms. Oldest point found in Maryland. And what does one do if they discover Monteverde? Thank you. That's the name of the site in Chile. Thank you so much. I was like, it's M, but I couldn't think of it.
Yeah, and also, yeah, speaking of Monteverde, like there are, yeah, I want to weigh in on my thought about the pre-Clovis. Yeah, like I think it's absolutely possible. Like, like Becca had said, like 20,000 years ago, it's certainly possible, just because we, when people started studying or finding the Clovis period sites, and things were in a way it became verified at that point. So, more archaeology, the more science you do, the more you learn. And so people are finding these earlier sites, like in Monteverde, and there is some contention of if that's even possible. I know there's some issues with the radiocarbon dates, or maybe potential issues with the radiocarbon dates. I think identifying, I mean, I'm a historical archaeologist, and so is Lisa. And so finding out that, that there are prehistoric archaeologists who are identifying these fantastic sites that may extend back 14, 15, even 20,000 years is super exciting. We have an archaeologist friend who makes his career of just fighting pre-Clovis just for the sake of fighting pre-Clovis. So he writes articles basically just fighting the potential, even though I think there is an increasing body of evidence that maybe not 20,000 years, but I think we are definitely pushing it back several thousand, particularly even in Maryland and Virginia, we're finding sites now that are, up to like 15 and 16,000 years. So I think it's absolutely possible. To your question, Mason, about what does one do if they discover an archaeological site? Congratulate yourself. That's the first thing you should do. Be super excited because now you're an archaeologist. But you should record it. So our knowledge about our past, both historical and prehistorical, is only beneficial to us if we let people know about it and we study it responsibly. And so there is a system, and it's absolutely available if you're in Maryland or Virginia or any state. Anybody, you don't have to be an archaeologist to do this. If you find an archaeological site, you can record that archaeological site with the State Historic Preservation Office. Every state has one. District of Columbia has one. There are, it's essentially a form. We recently did this for Ilka, who's in our talk tonight, found a fantastic site in Loch Raven, and we have completed an archaeological site form. You record it with the registrar, so it's on file. That's the first thing you do. The other thing is you don't want to just dig in it willy-nilly, because, and Lisa can speak to this, but it's, stratigraphic integrity, we've discussed this already, is incredibly important. Once you doing archaeology, it may sound a little odd, but like as archaeologists, we are concerned about preserving our archaeological sites, but as archaeologists, when we dig a site, we destroy it. So how do we reconcile that? And that is considerable documentation, documenting the where we dig, how we dig, how quick we, how the stratigraphic levels that we dig at, all helps us, because not just us, but us, the future archaeologists. Because once we remove those things from the ground, we have that knowledge. And if we don't document it well enough, future generations who may have different questions or may go back to the site won't have that information for themselves. So we take meticulous notes, we make meticulous maps, we do 3D scans of artifacts, so that the best we try to put as much information out there so that if any future generations want to come and learn about the sites, or excavate the sites, or look at the collections, that they have all the information that is possible available to them. Where can we find the registry of sites?
Right. I mean, for Maryland, if it's a Maryland site, it's the Maryland Historical Trust, and you do have to navigate around their website a little bit. If you find an archaeological site, feel free to contact us. I think a lot of people you can contact an archaeologist at a university. I generally find them less helpful to the general public, but we can definitely help you complete a site form and get that submitted. And we won't steal the information. Just FYI, everybody, there is not a secret government organization of archaeologists who are going to come and steal your stuff. There are not enough of us. It's too expensive. We don't have time. But if you'd like to record it so that people are aware that it's there, because this is huge for research, we can completely help you do that. So just reach out to the Natural History Society or to us, and we'd be happy to help you get that done. Somebody else asked what the oldest point found in Maryland is, and I believe the oldest one that I'm aware of that's currently recorded is probably about 11,000 years old.
Yeah, there's been several Clovis sites that have been identified by actually Dan Wagner, working on the Eastern Shore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Higgins site,
Mm-hmm.
near BWI.
Jess, you had asked, thank you for asking this. Yes, I do have a personal 3D scanner. So we bought a 3D scanner for our the Herring Run Archaeology Project. So a lot of the collections that we, the materials we find from Herring Run and from, as well as the chroniclers' houses, we've been scanning for purposes like this, for these presentations, but just anyone can go to Sketchfab and look at our artifacts. So what do we use? I use a light scanner. It's an N-scan. So it uses basically white light to detect the points and like the shape of the object, and also captures the texture. So that's what you're seeing right now is from that scanner. And then does the Society have a plan to digitize the archaeological collection? We absolutely do. We have many, many thousands of artifacts, and we aren't going to digitize the entire collection, but we are in the process, and by we, I mean Lisa and I are in the process of digitizing representative examples of the collection. So we have artifacts from across Maryland, but from some particular sites, as well as from other states and other countries. We have Saint Domingue. We have some sites from, I think, like Colombia, as well as, I'm sorry, the dog is now with me, so it's crying. Yeah, and so we've been scanning those artifacts as well. But yeah, not everything. We have thousands and thousands of things, and that just will take forever. But we are hoping to make it widely available, and it's not just the archaeology. We're also in the process of scanning other parts of our collections. Our osteology collection, I've started doing that, as well as our fossil collection.
Yeah, and if you have research that you want to do on points, or if you want to get a better look at certain different types of points, we have a huge variety. We don't have any Folsom or Clovis in the NHSM collection, sadly, but we do have a huge variety of Maryland, Tennessee, Arizona, Ohio, a lot of Adena points that we recently identified.
Texas. I can actually bring up some of the Adena stuff, because I tried to focus this presentation on just our
Maryland stuff.
But quite honestly, like, I agree. I'm sorry, I forget the gentleman's name who does the Flint napping. But I agree. Like, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I have made my professional career in Maryland, but Lisa has lived in Texas, and we went out there to visit her parents, and I swear to God, the material that I saw there was just phenomenal. It's like, God, why is our stuff such crap? And it's not that bad, but once you see like really good stuff, you know.
Yeah, if you want some of that, it's Brushy Creek chert from outside of Austin, Texas. My parents live on a former historic or prehistoric quarry of that stuff. They literally live on top of it, and it's everywhere, and it's gorgeous. So I have a ton of big rocks if you want some. Anyway, yeah, the Adena points are pretty special. You had a couple other, we only have a few minutes left, but I think you had a few other neat ones that you scanned for this, if people want to see them. And again, you can look at these. We have a page, we have all this stuff scanned. Yes, they are available. I think, Jason, if you can post the link to our page.
Yeah, absolutely.
That you can go look at these, and if you'd like to visit them in person at some point, we can probably arrange an appointment to come and see them one-on-one if you'd like to do that.
Yeah.
And seeing them in person when the pandemic is over, in different meetings, maybe with the archaeological club and things like that. So stay connected to the society, get involved, because there's always opportunities to have access to these wonderful collections.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things, we do, as we mentioned sort of at the beginning and before this officially started, all of our collections, some of them were excavated by staff of the Natural History Society in the 30s and 40s, but the majority of things that we have are donated. And, varying degrees of information about what site they came from, what state they came from, what country they came from. So we've been working on figuring out what's the best use of these? Like, what's the best way to allow the public to benefit from the information that's available about these objects? And I think, you know, we're still sort of trying to work through that. Somebody asked, do we know if people out here used ishi sticks for indirect percussion? Someone may know. Off the top of my head, I do not. Pressure flaking with antler or bone. Do we know the tools used to make the tools? Yes. Antler and bone for sure. We've actually found the antler and bone tools at sites in Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, all over the East Coast. So we know that they were definitely using bone and antler for sort of as finishing tools. Oh, somebody said something very nice, that they're motivated to sift locally for something besides dino-shark teeth. Fun fact, at the Natural History Society, we have megalodon teeth or fossilized shark teeth that were utilized as stone tools.
Oh, I have those scanned as well.
Cool.
I can bring that up.
Yeah, more on that later.
One of the things is, for each of the clubs has a dedicated Facebook group site, what allows the members of the clubs to communicate and share different things. So that's also a benefit of joining the society and being a member of the club, because if you are out there sifting through things and finding things, then you can share it with your peers on via the Facebook club site.
Okay, two things. Can I show something that was found on a relative's farm in South Dakota? Go for it. And how do you know that the meg was used as an Indian tool? Because it has very clearly, there are multiples, and they all have sort of napping marks where they were hafted onto a tool. I don't think that they are ideal for tool making, but it seems like people were like, these shark teeth are cool, they're everywhere, like let's make one into a pointy thing. But it was
there have been sites that have, I mean, not megalodon that I know of personally, but I just haven't done a lot of research in that regard. But there have been, there's opportunistic tools all the time. And other teeth, just not just megalodon teeth, but regular shark's teeth have been found in archaeological contexts, as well as bone, just sharpened bone, utilized, deer bone and such. So, and not just for projectile points. And the other thing about projectile points that we're talking about for this is, like, we've discussed like arrowheads used for arrows or for spears, but they're also being utilized for other reasons too. Drills, hole punching, reason for that. And as Lisa had said, like, some are also used for knives. A lot of the projectile points, you know, they're not just good for you know, hunting, but they're also good for processing. So some of the materials that could be these megalodon teeth could also be potentially used for that as well.
Stop talking about it. Somebody has a presentation for NHSM that they're going to give on those, so we're stepping on toes.
Yes, we are. That's true. Apologies.
Other talk. So we're stopping now. No more stone tools, not megalodon tools.
Yes. They are pocket-sized pieces of the past, though.
Yes, that's true. They are.
I thought we had another question about someone was going to show something.
From a relative's farm in South Dakota.
Can you see this?
Oh, yes.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Right, it's a groundstone axe or hammer type tool, totally.
Ah.
Yeah, so we have, for example, where is it?
I know you have one in here.
Oh, I definitely have one here because they're super cool and they're super fun to scan. They turn out really well.
Here it is.
So here's a broken grooved axe where it's, if it loads up, there we go. It's coming.
Oh.
There we go. So yeah, I mean, the telltale thing, Ilka and I have a friend who found a stone and thought it was an axe, and Ilka very adeptly indicated that this smoothing, this working right here was is a telltale sign, because it needs to be hafted in some way, or in this case, this is a hand axe. So it's a smaller one. Again, this is only about 6 inches, and the distance between this is about 1.5 inches. So yeah, it was essentially a hand axe as opposed to one that was hafted. Although these smaller ones like this would be hafted.
You want this one? Everybody.
Why don't you want it?
That rock in your house.
It's a great paperweight.
It is. Like,
Just
you know,
point out, they do last. Look, you make that thing once and you never have to make it again. You never know. It could be the end times. So you might want to hold on to it. Paperweight, doorstop, zombie killer.
Yeah.
definitely.
You could spend a whole lot of time rubbing it against another rock and making, sharpening it back up again.
Yeah, that's true.
I know this is an pocket-sized piece of the past, but it's also one of my favorites. It's a nice shirt spade that was used for farming in the late woodland period. So again, it's about 10 inches long. And this is also not from Maryland, however. It's from Illinois.
This thing is amazing. It's really beautiful. The material is really nice. If you get a chance to see it in person, it's exciting to look at.
So is that tool set up like a hoe? It's kind of like,
Yeah, it would have been like a
cut
hand
down.
spade. So it would have been hafted to some sort of like wooden implement, and yeah, it was for agricultural use for farming.
So you're talking about points being used for other things and stuff. I had this little point that I put on here that I was using to take skin off of the outer part of the bark. Actually, not bark. It was for making fibers. It was doing nettles.
Yeah.
And it worked super well just to like stick that on there, like use it like a sickle and just strip things. You can use them for a lot. And that's the cool thing that I like about the idea of flint knapping. They go out into the woods. They don't have to carry all their tools with them.
Right.
A lot of it is just make it there quick, and then when you're done using it, you don't even have to carry it back, because it's something you just throw together fast. That's why those nice points are real works of art. I mean, they're things that they may have made a core for, so they don't have to carry back a whole big rock, but make the core out in the field, bring it back, and you can chip off pieces from that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so like to your point about what was it about the woodworking? Yes, and that's the other thing. Like knives, lithic stone tools. Knives were not just used for like processing hides, but also for processing wood, for carving as well. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, you're basically doing what people have done over thousands of years.
Yeah, and I have friends with lapidaries, and they just laugh at me.
So we have a question about the Conowingo site. Do we have anything from the Conowingo site? Lisa, do we have anything from the Conowingo site?
Oh, please. We have like practically nothing but stuff from the Conowingo site.
Yeah, so Conowingo. So the Conowingo site is really interesting. So it's a site that is now gone. Lisa and I were actually just looking at it and lamenting about it yesterday. It was located just south of the Conowingo Dam and has been inundated and basically erased from history, basically due to the flooding that occurs at the river. But the site has been investigated numerous times. I think as recently as the 90s or 2000. Yeah. But our collection from the Conowingo site dates back to when Richard Stearns investigated the site back in 1943. And I would say the majority of the artifacts that I have scanned, not these particularly because those are Tahino and Casas Grande, but a lot of these, like this slate gorget, these shell gorgets, celts, and a lot of the projectile points all come from the Conowingo site as part of our collection with the Conowingo site. The majority of the collection from the Conowingo site, I believe, is at Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum at the Maryland Conservation Laboratory, the MAC Lab. And so it's an amazing site. I was actually just talking about it yesterday with with Lisa, and I was like, my God, this site must have been so important. It would be really interesting to be able to, and again, talking about site integrity, all these archaeological investigations have not just have really, really fantastic artifacts, but also field notes about that. And if someone's looking for a dissertation topic, someone should really take a look at all of the collections that are dispersed both at the Natural History Society, at the Mac Lab, at the Smithsonian, and write up something, because I swear to God, that site was like the mecca of pre-contact, occupation. We have the Conowingo site dates back from the early Archaic period. Some of those early Archaic points that I had shown were from the Conowingo site up to the late Woodland and Contact period. We even have one of the objects we have, and I guess it is a pocket-sized piece of the past, is a gunflint. Here. This gunflint was actually recovered from the Conowingo site. So, lithic material going back 9,000, down from 9,000 BC to about, 1700 AD.
It's very cool. Also, if you'd like to come and look at 55 actual tons of steatite bowls, many of those also came from Conowingo.
Yes. As well as some fantastic pre-contact period pottery.
Yeah.
Some really amazing. I just was scanning some really awesome shards with beautiful decoration. Stuff that actually is not typical for the region, at least has been documented. So things that you would find typically in Virginia was found in at the Conowingo site. So again, talking about that trade network.
All right, well, we're past 8. I want to thank Lisa and Jason for sharing their knowledge and expertise and photographs and images with us all. I hope that you'll join us for another program, either on a Thursday or a field trip, and keep in touch. We have a YouTube page, a blog, all kinds of different ways to continue our mission of feeding your curiosity in terms of natural history. And hopefully, if they can lend us some more of their time, we'll call upon Lisa and Jason to share some more of the amazing archaeology from this area.
Yeah, we would love to do a pocket-sized piece of the past of marbles. I'm just saying. I'm just putting it out there, Bronwyn.
I'd be up for that.
I don't know. They're really hard to 3D scan or take pictures of, but
they turn out really. I've figured it out. I am an expert now.
All right, marbles. We're on for marbles, y'all.
Yeah, they also have really great pictures too. Oh, and the frozen Charlottes, absolutely.
If you think rocks was good, wait until pocket-sized pieces of your childhood comes to NHSM.
Oh yes.
So again, on behalf of everybody here, thank you so much, and we hope to see you again at one of our other presentations or programs. Please stay connected. It is an amazing organization populated by very interesting and amazing people, run by volunteers who are passionate about everything that has to do with the natural world.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. It was a real joy.
That was real. Thank you.
If we have more questions, where do we send them?
Oh, sure. I mean, I don't know, Bronwyn. What do you usually do?
Feel free to either you can put your email in there, they can email to me, and I can facilitate. It depends on what the presenters, how comfortable they are with that.
Yeah, no, but we're totally happy to answer any questions. If you have some, if Bronwyn, if you can compile them in a list, and we can just, I mean, I think if any one person has a question, I think it's beneficial.
You can put, I just put our Herring Run Archaeology account in the chat box. You can get both of us have access to that. And as you can see, like, it's hard to shut us up. You will totally get answers to any questions we can answer.
Lisa, you put that just to privately. Can you put that to everyone?
Yeah, I didn't mean to put it privately.
Putting it privately too.
One publicly, let's do.
Oh, and Becca, you asked what's the MAC site? So the MAC lab is the Maryland Archaeology Conservation Laboratory. It's at Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum in Calvert. Is it Calvert County? Yeah, Oprah just answered my question. It is also a great online site. And also a lot of the information, not that, you know, there is a ton of information about archaeological identification of artifacts. So there's an amazing collection, discussion of diagnostic artifacts of Maryland regarding projectile points, pre-contact period pottery, and historic artifacts. And one of their things that they've been expanding upon are like the small, they're calling it small finds, but it's the other things that you wouldn't typically think about, like pottery, but they're talking about like horse furniture and marbles and buttons and cuff links. It's just a fantastic site. It's our state agency, it's our state SHPO's office, and they are an amazing group of people who are just looking to share archaeology with everybody. So I would definitely suggest checking it out.
All right, sounds like that's about it.
All right, thanks everybody. Everybody stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
All right, thank you.